and welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm your host, Lauren Kalil. Our show is brought to you by Whoop. Start tracking your strain, recovery, and sleep score with Whoop, and even get an extra month's membership and a free 4.0 strap when you sign up with the link in our description. If you like listening to us chat about CrossFit news and everything that's going on in the sport, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. On this episode, we have Brian Friend and 14-time CrossFit Games athlete Becca Voigt Miller to discuss some potential challenges with backfilling semifinals based on registration deadlines. Brian, I want to start with you because you recently wrote an article outlining the registration windows for athletes that were invited to semifinals. This year, athletes who qualify for multiple semifinal stages can only choose one path, whether that be individual, team, or age group. But what is the biggest potential problem that you see when looking at this timeline?
Yeah, well, it's that the quarterfinal stage of competition is stretched out over nearly a month. And there are three distinct quarterfinal stages of competition, one for the individual field, one for the teams, and one for the age groups. And so in the case that someone qualifies for the semifinals as either an individual or a team or as an age group athlete or potentially all three of those things, the timeline for when they need to decide which path they want to pursue for the remainder of the season isn't that as clear as choose after the quarterfinals. Because in the process of getting to the next stage of the competition, a series of invitations have to go out to athletes in all of those groups, and then they have a certain amount of time in which they have to respond. And in the case of the age group athletes in particular, most of which are masters athletes in this case, they're the timeline that CrossFit recently released in an art, I guess it was an end of day that they sent out, which I thought was great that they sent out this end of day, and they had the detailed schedule with the important dates for people to start putting in their calendar as it pertains to them, shows that there was a little bit of an overlap that could potentially make it really difficult for athletes who are potentially waiting to get backfill invitations for semifinals for the individual semifinals if masters athletes who were told by CrossFit that they could accept invitations to individual semifinals and later rescind those accepted spots in lieu of competing as a masters athlete, because of the amount of time that could happen between that and the start of semifinals is very short and potentially actually even negative days. I don't know how else to say that, but the window for
Yeah, you can even see it here, the overlap.
Yeah. So the window for accepting the age group semifinal invitations is longer than it was for individuals. They're supposed to be emailed out on the 10th, and they have up until the 23rd to register. But the first weekend of semifinals for individuals will be done by then.
So it seems like there's going to be a lot of back and forth communication between accepting the invite, then possibly revoking your invite to accept to another. Is there a better way to do this instead of having all of the back and forth communication?
I mean, I would say that yes, there's definitely a better way. I don't know exactly what that way is, but I think one of the major concerns for athletes of any group that they're in is they want to know where they're competing and when they're competing as soon as possible, and that's important for them on a number of different levels. Obviously, their training can be tailored to that information, but even beyond that, we know that traveling now is more difficult than it's ever been. And with people being able to travel more freely now, airline tickets are rising. Maybe hotels are starting to cost more of what they used to. And sometimes people's finances look differently than they did 3 years ago because of all the changes in the world. So having that information early is super important, not just from a competitive aspect, but also from a logistical aspect. And I think that it would be, in CrossFit's best interest to get that information to athletes in as timely a manner as they can.
Becca, you're an athlete that is being directly impacted by this. You've received your invite to the Granite Games. You've accepted it at this point, but you're going to be competing in the age group quarterfinals this weekend. What has the process been like for you so far? And what potential challenges do you see when it comes to deciding which semifinal to go to, whether it's age group or individual, and any travel plans that you're potentially going to be making?
Yeah, I mean, the process, has been a little less straightforward than I would have liked. Going through the individual or the quarterfinals was just a fun thing that I wanted to do regardless of if I was going to be able to compete at the semifinals. I just wanted to see where I was at. Just it's good to put myself into a pressure situation for 5 workouts, and so that's really what I was treating it as. And then right before the deadline for the individual semifinals, um, I put up a poll on my Instagram, and I was just like, do I accept it? Do I decline it? And I was just kind of playing around with everybody that followed me. I just wanted to see what people had to say. And then I got a message from Jen Ryan who said, you accept it and you go ahead, and just in case, you accept it and something goes bad, like she had in the previous year where she missed the deadline for submitting one of her scores and she wasn't able to compete. She was like, it's a good way to kind of have a little bit of a fail safe, but also like if you wanted to go to individual semifinals, you do have what it takes. And it was one of those things that I was like, oh, that's a really good thought process. And so then that's when I had to go ahead and email CrossFit and just get clarification, because the last thing that I wanted to do was accept my semifinals invitation as an individual and then all of a sudden not be able to possibly accept a semifinals masters invitation if and when I get it. So there was a little bit of a vagueness that was to it, but I mean, luckily when I email CrossFit, I do get a response pretty quickly. And so it was pretty straightforward on what I could do. And so since this is just a game, I'm going to play the game as best as I can. And so I registered for individuals, and we'll see after this weekend what's going to happen.
Brian, Becca is just one of 19 athletes that you highlighted in your article that could potentially qualify for the age group semifinal. What happens if a big group of these athletes take away their individual semifinal and choose to go the age group path?
Yeah, actually, this is probably like the best thing that came out of this complicated schedule, is that I took it upon myself to then look and see, like, okay, how many people is this relevant for? Because I can obviously look and see names like Rebecca Voigt Miller and Jen Ryan, and I know these are masters athletes that have been around for a long time. But there's a bunch of masters age athletes that have recently become 35 years old, and names that I don't necessarily know because they're from all over the world. And so I thought that in addition to pointing out that there was potentially some scheduling conflicts here, this was a nice opportunity to recognize the 18 masters athletes and one Emma Lawson teenage athlete who accepted their invitations. There were others that potentially qualified, like we know of teenagers like Olivia Kersitter and Trish Smith that denied those. Or decline those invites, but these ones that they made it, and so I thought this was a cool opportunity to at least highlight that accomplishment for them. But I also looked a little closer because I wanted to see how likely was it that some of these athletes would actually qualify for the next stage of competition, which would be the age group semifinals. And in that case, you see people who are finishing like 505th in their division. That person's probably not going to make it through. So it makes sense for them to sign up as the individual if they could compete in Africa in the semifinal. That's a great opportunity for them. But there were a lot that were placing, 28th, 23rd. In Becca's case, she was, I think were you second and first in your division? You were 7th. Jen was 2nd. Emma was 1st. This other person, 25th, 9th. A lot of people that are going to be relevant into that conversation. And then the last thing I wanted to see was, well, what semifinals were the masters athletes invited to? Because if they were invited to the last 2 weeks in the cases of North America and Europe where they could push those off, then I could say, like, okay, at least they tried to put them in the later weeks so that in the case that this did happen and they had to backfill, they could give the athletes that received the backfill invitations more time to make plans. But in some cases, there's 2 athletes competing in the Torian Pro, which there's no other option but to compete week 1. I don't know what's going to happen if either of them actually make it through, because there's no chance with the timeline that's that could happen. And then for the ones in week 2, there's a bunch that actually could make it. I mean, Jason Smith has a great chance. Haley Murillo, Kelly Clark, all of them could easily qualify for the next stage, and that would be really tight if they try to backfill those spots for week 2.
So is there potential for some of these individual semifinals to have open lanes?
I don't know, because I'm not sure. I don't know how deep down the quarterfinals leaderboard CrossFit would be willing to go to find someone who's willing to make the trip last minute like that. I feel like there are probably athletes that would take him up on that offer, but I also don't know if they want to have someone, go down 30, 40 spots to try to find someone who's willing to do that. So yeah, I think there is the potential for that.
Becca, when it comes to deciding whether you want to go individual or age group, are you at the point, even before you compete this weekend, that you kind of have an inkling of what you're going to do?
Yeah, of course I am definitely leaning towards one direction. Um, and so it does make it a little bit challenging. Some people would say I'm being selfish, and that's fine. They can think that. But yeah, I do have an idea of where I want to go, but I'm not going to close one door before I have all my facts right in front of me. So it won't be decided. And I'll know very quickly after this weekend what route I'm going to go. So for me, I feel like I'm not going to sit on this. As soon as I have confirmation that I have made it one way or the other, then I'll make my decision. And so hopefully that gives the person who's in the next spot more opportunity to get notified, or at least give CrossFit the opportunity to notify them much sooner, so that it's a little bit fair if that's the case I go.
Sure. Brian, what is your bottom line?
I think that the bottom line here is, I'm not really sure how well thought out this process was, and I think that it is perfectly okay to expect the athletes to make a decision at some point in the season about what path they want to compete in. But when that decision affects a bunch of other things in line, that the timeliness of it is important, and I am not so sure that CrossFit considered that here.
Becca, what is your bottom line?
I mean, bottom line is that, this is a sport, and I understand there's a lot of money on the line, but ultimately it's a game and it's for fun. And if this is all of our focus, which it's not for me, then we probably need to expand on our life a little bit better, and just kind of see what's really truly important. And I know that CrossFit is trying to do the best that they can. It's got to be hard. There's a lot of moving parts, so. I'm a diehard CrossFit fan. What can I say?
You've been at it for a long time, Becca. Good luck this weekend. Brian, thank you so much for sitting down with us, and we'll see you guys next time.